Okay, well, welcome everyone to this meeting of the virtual CICS User Group. Let me first introduce myself then. I'm Trevor Eddles and I'm CEO of iTechEd, which is a mainframe consultancy, analysis and technical authoring organisation. We're the people responsible for the content on the virtual CICS website and in the newsletter. And you may be interested to know that we also look after the virtual IMS user group too. And before we start, I'd like to thank Fundy Software, who are the people sponsoring this user group. Okay, I'd like to run through the agenda for this meeting, and as usual, most of the meeting will be taken up with a presentation. And today our guest presenter is James Alexander, Director of Technical Services at HostBridge Technology. James will be discussing integrating LIFE-COMM, Life-70 or other CICS resident insurance and annuity applications with distributed applications using the ACORD standard. And a copy of the slides from this presentation will be on the website by tomorrow. If you missed our previous meetings, you can download copies of those presentations from our website, and you can listen again to the whole presentations if you want to. There's a link on the resources page of the user group website. So following James's presentation and any questions you have for him, we'll move on to the latest CICS news and latest CICS related articles. Feedback requests is there to remind me to ask you for your feedback about this virtual meeting so we can improve things for next time. And then I'll give you the dates and times for the next virtual meetings. So that's the plan for this meeting, and I'm anticipating that it will last for about 45 minutes. Anyway, as I just said, today's presentation is given by James Alexander, Director of Technical Services at HostBridge Technology. James has over 22 years of experience in mainframe systems programming and managing large IT organizations. He's currently responsible for IT services and HostBridge product support. Prior to joining HostBridge, James was Head of Information Technology Services at Oklahoma State University, where he set direction for IT services, including network operations, and oversaw integration of disparate technologies into uniform business solutions. So James, I'd like to thank you very much for being with us today, and what I'd like to do now is pass control of the meeting over to you.
Thank you, Trevor.
Okay.
The presentation today, I'm gonna keep this mostly a non-technical presentation. I like to keep things so that everybody can stay on board and follow all the way through. Insurance is really an interesting industry from perspective of trying to provide services. They've got a lot of applications that have been around for a very long time inside of CICS, and they've got a lot of money invested in those applications. At a minimum, tens of millions of dollars, sometimes much more than that. The applications themselves sometimes have been around for as long as 30 years or longer. And as typical of applications of that age running inside of CICS, the applications can be very, very complex. Lots of screens, lots of encoded fields. But the applications still do the business portion that they need to do. They still provide, fulfill the business need. But nobody wants to use a 3270 terminal anymore. The amount has to be invested in training and education of new staff to interact with those applications grows until it becomes really unmanageable in many instances. People want to use new media. They want to use new interfaces. They want to be able to use their browser. They want to have an intuitive interface that they understand. But you can't throw away that investment you have in these applications on the host. They still do what the customer needs them to do. They're still very functional, and trying to migrate off the host is a very, very expensive process. One of our customers estimated it would be over $100 million to try to migrate their applications off the host. The real problem is not the application itself. I mean, it does what you need it to do. The problem is you don't have the interface into the application you need to have for today's customers. The problem with integrating applications on the host or inside of CICS, or especially insurance applications, is that they're very complex. You know, they fill the screen with lots of fields. Sometimes the fields are not very descriptive. Sometimes it's very hard to tell what's going on, and a lot of training takes place. We have customers that actually have to train their operators up to 2 years to be able to interact with their applications. This screen's a good example of that. You would have to have a lot of training to understand how to fill out this screen, how to add new records to this screen, and what each one of these codes mean. But my favorite screen of all the customers, of all the screens I've seen at customer sites, is, well, not this one, it's going to be the following one, but this was another good example. Look at all the fields here, all these encodings. This is an example of a screen. They have dozens of these screens with hundreds of these field labels. Each one you either have to know, or you have to have the book setting next to you so you can go look these things up and understand not only what the field represents, but then actually a description of how to interpret the value of the field. But this is my favorite screen of all the customer screens I've seen. And the reason it's my favorite is because I am assuming you can see my mouse movement, but I'm going to grab a pen. I'll do a highlighter. You know, starting right about here on this screen where the ADR is and going all the way down to here, that's a single field on this screen. The operator actually has to understand how to code all of the values in the screen. Where every single comma goes, where every slash goes, where every @ sign goes, it has to understand what all of those values mean to fill out this screen. It's a crazy screen. It's frightening to me, to someone, if I had to do training on this, or if I had to implement a training regimen for this, this is frightening to me. How long would it take for you to get someone productive with this sort of environment? Now, the insurance industry not only has these very complex screens, and hundreds of them, but the screens are also, I've got to turn off my arrow before I can navigate, the screens also, the process for the screens can be very long. And what do I mean by a process? A process is something like change address, or change policy, or add customer. That's a process. And so to be able to do one of these processes very often is 5, 10, 20, 30 screens sometimes, encapsulates an entire process. And when you want to integrate host applications with the new media applications that run off the host, you have to encapsulate these processes and turn them into business processes that are callable by these new media applications. So add customer or change address becomes a service, a business service. And any one of those may encapsulate, you know, a number of screens. And the screens can be very complex. Even when they actually have good labels like this application does, there's a lot of screens you have to walk through to be able to complete a single process. And on each single screen, there are confirmations that have to be made. There are messages that may pop on the screen that have to be dealt with. In each and every one of those cases, you have to be able to react to those. Now, an operator can react to those, an operator with a lot of training, or you can have some sort of process that walks through those screens, knows how to react to all the messages, how to fill in all the fields to turn that business process that was originally meant to only run on a terminal, turn that business process into a service. The goal of all this is to get to the new media. The goal of this is to get to a web browser, or a Windows application, or maybe the Holy Grail is to something that runs on your phone or tablet, so that you can interact with these very complex applications on the back end through very simple interfaces, where you have drop-down boxes available to you. I'm going to go back to my arrow here. Where you have drop-down boxes available to you on screens instead of having to memorize an esoteric code of some sort. so that you can interact with these applications in an intuitive way so that your training costs come way down and your productivity goes way up. So this is what you're trying to get to. Now, something that the insurance industry has done is that they have a standard that allows you to talk from the legacy applications to the new media applications. That standard is ACORD. And I think the insurance industry has done a better job at this than probably any other industry that I'm aware of. Now, I know the medical, a lot of in the medical area are trying to get to this point where they have these standards behind it, but the insurance industry is there. And so they have this standard that allows them to talk from one application to another application, and they have a standard conversation that's going to take place between them. Well, that's great if you're talking from one new media application to another. But all of these things that reside inside the host, they don't know how to talk the ACORD conversation. All of these things running on the host over here, they have something in common. And that thing they have in common is that they do the business needs. Okay? And everything on this side, what they have in common is they talk the ACORD standards, so they can talk among each other. So you have to find a way to be able to get from here to there. And ACORD is the conversation. It's the way to do that. But the problem with ACORD, and it may not be a problem, it's a problem for you if you have to do the integration. The problem with ACORD is that it's very complex. The ACORD object model, this is one page from the ACORD object model. The ACORD object model is very complex, and this is just one page from the Life and Annuity ACORD object model. They have other object models for different insurance products, but for Life and Annuity, this is one page out of that object model. And this is just kind of the high-level overview diagram out of one page out of this manual. And you can see that it's very detailed and it's very complex. In fact, it's the PDF description of the standard, which has every field and every attribute and every value that can be in every one of the fields, is a PDF that's 4,000 pages long. Wow. So the standard is very thorough, very detailed. Even the machine-readable description of the standard, which is called an XSD, and that's the schema that a program can use to be able to understand what a ACORD message looks like, how it has to construct an ACORD message so another system can read it. The machine-readable format, the XSD, is 22,000 lines long. I've never seen a schema 22,000 lines long until I dealt with ACORD. Wow. It's very complex, very hard to implement by hand, and it's very thorough, though. It really means that you've got this very thorough description of the conversation. So you now know how to talk to these new media applications. You know how to talk to the applications written by CICS or by Oracle or by SAP or the others, dozens of insurance applications that you may acquire. Somehow you've got to interface to those, from those to the applications that run on the host. They know nothing about ACORD. In fact, the applications written on the host were probably written and designed before many of the people who wrote the ACORD application were born. So these applications predate ACORD by a long, long way. So somehow you have to get from here to there. So in this example of my favorite screen from the customer, almost every single field on this screen has to be transformed because the ACORD standard dictates all the encodings of all the different fields. So a PLOB21 or a plan UL, that has to be transformed into the ACORD standard so that when you talk to that new media application, it understands what that is. Even very simple things like sex has an encoding. Sex has, the encodings are unknown, male, female, unisex, combined, and other. That's just for the very simple field of female, of sex, sorry. Now, the only field on this screen that I don't think has to do, you don't have to have any transformations on is probably age, 22. That one you can probably carry straight through. but almost every other field on the screen is going to have to be transformed in one way or another to the ACORD standard before you can talk to the host. So you've got to be able to get from this to a machine-readable ACORD standard document before that new media application can understand what it is. From this to this. The path for that, from the application that's running on the host, and this is another good example of all the transformations that have to take place, and where do all these fields go in the ACORD standard and how they have to be transformed. You've got to be able to get from this to ACORD to standard document, from there into your new media application, so that you're on you can see this in your web browser. Now remember, to build this single ACORD document, you might have to go through 10, 20, 30, 40 screens. So you've got to take that business process. Let's just start off simple. Let's just say we want to do a get policy information. You might have to walk through 20 or 30 screens to be able to get all the information related to a specific policy. In fact, all the information might not even be in the same CICS application. You might actually have to go through a couple of different applications to be able to get all of the policy information. You've got to navigate through all those screens, respond to all the messages that might pop up, gather up that information, do the transformation into the ACORD standard, and then ship that over to the new media application. And you've got to do that in sub-second time. Now, you can't have people, I mean, if they're on the web, or if they're on a Windows application, they're going to expect good response time, sub-second response time. So you've got to gather up that information, you've got to transform it, you've got to send it over, and don't forget, this is a bidirectional conversation, so you've got to go back the other direction. You've got to be able to talk from the web application into ACORD, from ACORD back into the legacy application. You may want to be able to add new policies. You may want to be able to do updates to those policies. So it's a bidirectional conversation. It's not just one way. The goal you should have for integration, I think, are these. First off, don't change your host application at all. If you have to change your host application, that means you have to revalidate your application. That means you're investing time and money making changes to those applications. Don't change your application on the host whatsoever. You want to be able to keep all your security, audit, and logging in place because, again, I'm sure all of you have gone through the security nightmare more than once, making sure that you're tracking all the information about who's doing what, who's accessed what information. You don't want to change any of that. You want to make sure that your audit, logging, security stays the same, so the model stays the same. And, of course, you have to follow all the standards. Most importantly for insurance is going to be the ACORD standard, but also the communications. The ACORD standard tells you what the message is, but it doesn't tell you what the transport has to be. The transport between systems might be MQ, but most commonly it's going to be HTTP. It's going to be a web service flowing over HTTP. You also have to make sure that your conversation is secure. Make sure that nothing's exposed, that everything's encrypted. Your solution has to scale. Not just from doing 5,000 or 6,000. Now, many of your legacy applications, maybe they're query only at this point. The insurance industry is unique in that these policies could have been written 25, 30 years ago, and you're not even writing new policies in the legacy system, but you've got to be able to access and update them with information. You've got to make sure that can scale up to large environments, though, because some of our customers are actually still creating new policies in these legacy systems. You've got to be able to scale up and do not just thousands a day, not just tens of thousands a day, but you've got to have the potential to scale up even into the millions. You've got to keep the reliability that those host applications have had over the years. And as I've already said before, you have to have the performance. You have to have sub-second response time all the way through the process. Even if you're navigating 20 or 30 screens to be able to return this information, you've got to have the performance. You have to have something that will allow you to develop your services quickly and easily so that you can do rapid development, rapid deployment. Now, the traditional approach for doing this kind of stuff historically has been screen scraping. Oh my, there's so many problems with screen scraping. It doesn't scale well. It's very complex because you have so many components in a screen scraping solution, and it breaks easily. Screen scraping cannot scale up to hundreds of thousands of requests a day, much less millions. And there are just so many places where things can go wrong. So the tendency to break is very high. The HostBridge approach is different. First off, we're not doing screen scraping. We run directly inside CICS right next to the applications. So the web service boundary, the place where we're providing that ACORD information, those ACORD web services, is directly out of the host. So your AWD or CSC application, Oracle, whatever it happens to be, that is going to be talking to your host application is talking directly to the host, not some other piece of middleware running on another server. Talking directly to the host to where your applications live. Now, what does this give you? It gives you the scalability we talked about. Because we're running on the host, we can scale up to the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of requests a day. The auditing and logging and security stays unchanged, and it's a very high performance solution. We have customers doing in excess of 100 transactions in a single request. In other words, 100 screens that a web service walks through in a single request and still get sub-second response time back to the client. Now, if it's unclear here, let me just walk through the process one more time, because you have your person sitting at a web browser talking to your new media middle tier environment, be that a CSC product or someone else's AWD or one of the other insurance applications, and it's talking directly to the host where HostBridge lives. A customer makes a request to the AWD server. AWD sends an ACORD style request to HostBridge running inside of CICS. It walks through any number of screens, doing all the defensive things that an operator would do, filling in all the fields, extracting out all the information to complete that request, and then a single response back to ACORD, who then formulates it and formats it for the client, and it does the presentation then back to the client. All of that has to happen in less than a second. HostBridge uses JavaScript for doing that fine-grained orchestration. And people have asked, why JavaScript? Well, JavaScript is the most popular scripting language in the world today. It runs in all browsers, and anybody that does web development has to be able to do JavaScript. At least at some point they'll have to. So you have this, we use a JavaScript engine running inside of CICS. JavaScript's easy to learn, it's a standard language. It allows you to create reusable code. So once I've written a piece of JavaScript that deals with a certain screen, I don't have to rewrite that code ever again. As long as I've taken care of all my inputs and outputs and all the checks and all the messages that screen might pop up in that piece of code, I never have to write that piece of code, even though I might be doing a totally different service. I'm no longer doing get policy info. Now I'm going to do a policy update. I never have to change that piece of code, and I can reuse it over and over again. With JavaScript running inside the host, we're able to do very rapid development, testing, and deployment. Installation of HostBridge is a couple of hours by the systems guys. It's very easy to put on. The JavaScript engine we use uses XML as a native data type. Now, why do you care? Well, ACORD is a very complex XML structure. And having XML as a native data type inside the language means that we can manipulate that ACORD document and make sure that we're returning exactly what the ACORD standard requires. As far as all those transformations I was talking about, all those fields that have inside of my LIFE-COMM or Life-70 application, all of those fields that have to be transformed from a UL or a PLOB21 into something else can be table driven. So if you're doing a little lookup inside the JavaScript engine from a table that says translate all my PLOBs number 21 into this, and back the other direction so that you can do that bidirectional transformation. And since they're in tables, they're easily maintained. They don't even have to be maintained by a programmer. They can be maintained by anybody that has access to the system. So we try to tackle all those critical issues when it comes to doing integration between the host and the middle tier. And of course, HostBridge was built on standards, whether the standard is JavaScript or XML, which ACORD is a subset of. So TCP/IP, standards across the board. And in fact, the development environment, the place where you actually build these web services, runs in a standard environment called Eclipse. Allows us to be able to create these scripts, to be able to explore the transactions we're going to be working with on the host, develop, test, and deploy, all from a single environment, all through a standards-based tool. This is the most technical thing I'm going to present unless the questions push us in another way. And I'll pause after this slide to see if there's any questions. As I've already said, all of HostBridge runs and resides inside of CICS. Nothing has to be installed in the middle tier on my AWD server. Nothing has to be installed on desktops of people who are going to be using it. Now, there's a development tool, like I said, that runs out here when you're developing your web services. But everything else runs on the host. AWD or whatever application is your new media application runs on the server. HostBridge runs on the host. Web services are supplied directly out of the host to your new media server. So what that looks like is, from a flow perspective, is that a request flows up from the client to the AWD server and then into HostBridge. HostBridge walks through all the screens on the host necessary to be able to complete that business process. And then it replies back to the server. HostBridge can do anything that an operator can do. It can react to any of the situations that someone sitting at a terminal can react to. And it can do it much, much, much faster so that you get a very quick response back to the client. I'm going to pause right here and see if Trevor's got any questions. Or if you have any questions, feel free to place them now.
Okay, we haven't got any questions so far. If anyone wants to ask a question, feel free.
Okay, I'm almost done. I want to go through just a couple more slides. So just, again, from a flow perspective, one request up to the host. HostBridge walks through any number of screens, does all the defensive checks, does everything an operator can do, and it can actually do more because we're running inside of CICS, and then a single response back to the client. If these things have been of interest to you, you can contact Farrell at that email address. And what we do is we like to do some full live demonstrations using our system, show you what the integration process looks like, what the tooling looks like, how you create web services, and how you interact with them. And if we do that, we might do that a couple of times for a customer with their technical people or with their business line people to show them what we can do. And then we like to come on site and do what we call a pilot application workshop. Your systems people would install HostBridge in your environment. A HostBridge engineer comes on site for 3 to 5 days. We develop web services for you on your applications in your environment. You test them and you play with them, you measure them, you do performance testing, you do load testing to make sure that what I say we can do, we can actually do with your applications. While the engineer is on site, we do knowledge transfer and we do in-depth technical discussions with your staff so that they really understand how HostBridge is doing what it's doing and that you feel comfortable of using HostBridge in your environment. And then after we leave, that product stays active for 30 days in your environment so you continue to play, write your own web services, test the ones that we've written, and be able to really understand how that works. Probably our best advocates are our customers that we already have. And you can see from this slide there are 3 insurance, well, 2 insurance and a health cooperative that are our customers, and their testimonials are best advertising as far as HostBridge is concerned. As you can see by that middle one, there's a customer that's, in a single request to the host, does 120 CICS screens. And it completes very, very fast. Very quick response time back to the middle tier so that those new media servers can assemble the stuff, do the presentation in their environment, whether that be on a phone or a tablet or in a web application. We've got lots. We love the insurance industry for several reasons. One reason is because they have very complex applications. And why do we love that complex applications? Because nobody but HostBridge can really do them. When it comes to doing integration from middle tier to the host, and you've got those tough applications, HostBridge is a great tool. And finally, if there are any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them now. Or if questions come up after the presentation and you'd like some more answers, feel free to email Farrell or email Trevor, and be more than happy to answer your questions.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks very much, James. I'm just looking to see if we've got any questions coming up on the chat. Questions. Let me just have a look. Okay, well, like James says, if you have got any questions, you can email me and I'll pass them on and make sure they're answered. So, James, thank you very much. As usual, can you assume that we're giving you a virtual round of applause for that presentation? Thank you very much.
I want to thank you for inviting me, and I know everybody's time is valuable, so I really appreciate you giving me this time.
Okay, all right, thank you, man. Let me just swap control back. Oops. Okay, yeah, thanks, James. Right, moving on then. In terms of news, IBM has announced CICS Transaction Server for ZOS, that's CICS Value Unit Edition, that's VUE, version 5.1, which offers a one-time charge, that's OTC, price metric for eligible workloads that are deployed in Qualified System Z New Application License Charge, that's the Z NALC bit, Logical Partitions, LPARs. Yeah, that was fun to say. CICS TS VUE offers the following benefits for eligible workloads. An OTC licensing option for CICS TS version 5.1 with subscription and support. Deployment to ZNALC LPARs, which delivers a reduced price for the ZOS operating system. The ability for new CICS TS VUE version 5 workloads to federate with existing CICS TS version 3, version 4 and version 5 workloads, and a license that does not initiate any SVC period for any other monthly license charge versions of CICS. That's easy to say. The link to the story is on the website. As for articles, we've got CICS 101 Resource Definition Online, and that's by Phyllis D'Onofrio, and that's in the May-June edition of Enterprise Tech Journal. There is one other in that edition, but it's not actually available. The hyperlink isn't there yet. So you can find the link to that story on our website. As always, can I ask for feedback about this meeting? You can comment on anything good and anything you think we can improve on for next time. Let me know about your experience of using GoToMeeting. And again, you can email your comments to me. My address is on screen, or you can use the Contact Us webpage. As you can see, planned for the future then, our next meeting is on the 9th of July. The start time is 10:30 a.m. Central Daylight Time. That's 11:30 Eastern Daylight, or 4:30 British Summer Time. And we've got a presentation from Matter of Fact Software, Stephen Mitchell. And then on the 10th of September, we have a presentation from Techknowledge. And as usual, there's our reminder that you can keep up to date with what's happening in the world of CICS and on the virtual CICS User Group website by following us on Facebook and Twitter, or by joining the virtual CICS User Group on LinkedIn. The URLs are all on the homepage of the website. And can I ask that you like us on Facebook these days? Everyone needs likes. And if you've joined one of those groups but not the main website, perhaps I can ask you to go to fundy.com/virtualkicks and sign up there as well. Anyway, that's all for this meeting of the Virtual CICS User Group. I'd like to thank you all for attending, and I'd particularly like to thank James Andrews for his presentation. Like I said, copies of the slides will be on our website as soon as possible, and you'll be able to download them from there. Okay, well that's it for this meeting. Thank you very much for joining the meeting, and I look forward to seeing you on the 9th of July. So thank you and goodbye.